You're watching Around the World, our top global stories. 1 year after Russia's President Vladimir Putin launched what he called a quote-unquote special military operation in Ukraine, or what was in real terms the invasion of Ukraine, both Russia and Ukraine are now preparing for fresh offensives that could set the stage for a new and potentially more disastrous phase of the war. In recent weeks, Russia has intensified its push to fully capture Ukraine's eastern industrial heartland of the Donbas region. The Kremlin has insisted that any future political settlement must include the recognition of Crimea that Russia had illegally annexed back in the year 2014. Ukraine has rejected those demands and ruled out any talks with Russia until it withdraws all of its troops. While Putin seems determined to press on with his military goals, Ukraine and its Western allies stand firmly to prevent Russia from walking out with any territorial gains. The conflict that has killed tens of thousands, turned millions into refugees, reduced entire cities to ruins, could yet drag on for years. Both parties have spent ammunition at a rate unseen in any armed conflict since the Second World War. Experts see little prospects for talks as both Russia and Ukraine hope to make battlefield gains as we speak. Now, as for recaptured areas of Ukraine, in eastern Ukraine, a mobile medical unit is trying to offer basic health services. Volunteers from the Alliance for Public Health, a public health charity, have set up a mobile treatment clinic which travels to recently recaptured areas of eastern Ukraine. Meanwhile, the city of Vuhledar in the eastern Donetsk region of Ukraine has been under constant bombardment. Burnt residential buildings were seen all over, and most of its residents have evacuated. Russia in the recent weeks has intensified its push to fully capture Ukraine's eastern industrial heartland of the Donbas region. And for Ukraine, it's not just a physical and mental battle, but a fight to preserve its cultural heritage as well. Ukraine's capital, Kiev's regional authorities are covering artworks in protective glass and setting up guards to prevent them from being looted. Speaking to an emergency session of the United Nations General Assembly, Secretary General Antonio Guterres stressed that the war is having dramatic humanitarian and human rights consequences.
War is the one-year mark of Russia's invasion of Ukraine stands as a grim milestone for the people of Ukraine and for the international community. That invasion is an affront to our collective conscience. It is a violation of the United Nations Charter and international law. It is having dramatic humanitarian and human rights consequences, and the impact is being felt far beyond Ukraine.
A resolution put forth will also be voted on later this week at the United Nations. Meanwhile, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, said that the vote will go down in history and we will be seeing where the countries of the world stand on the matter of peace in Ukraine. But even as Vladimir Putin suspended participation in the last remaining US-Russia nuclear arms control treaty, in an interview with America's ABC News, President Biden said that there was still no evidence that Russia was considering using a nuclear weapon, although he did say it was a big mistake on Putin's part to exit the treaty. On the other hand, Putin congratulated Russia's military on the Defender of the Fatherland Day, hailing Moscow's soldiers fighting in Ukraine. Russia's troops will now be provided with modern weapons and equipment, even as Putin also said that Russia was paying special attention to boosting its nuclear arsenal. Moving on, almost 3 weeks after the derailment of a train carrying toxic chemicals, the smell that blanketed the village of East-Palestine in the state of Ohio in the US is mostly gone. But residents of the village have no clear answers on whether the water and the air in the town is safe or not. They are angry at the American government's failure to clean up the toxic mess. And making most of the opportune moment was none other than Donald Trump, who visited the accident site, drawing a huge crowd and, of course, training his guns at the Biden administration. Trump visited East Palestine in Ohio, where 50 carriages of a train carrying toxic chemicals had derailed earlier this month. Hundreds of people gathered on the road outside the village of East Palestine's fire department. Many who gathered outside said that they questioned President Biden's handling of the derailment. Trump, speaking from that firehouse about half a mile from the accident site, said that the community needs answers and results, not excuses. Now, Trump also riled up the crowd by pointing out how the community's perseverance is being met with indifference and betrayal by the American government.
Said they would not send federal aid to East Palestine under any circumstance. They're not going to send aid. I thought that was a strange statement because I've been working with FEMA for a long time, 4 years, and they were great with us with the tornadoes, the hurricanes, and things like this.
Now, what Trump has essentially done is that he seized on Biden's decision to make a surprise visit to Ukraine when the president was yet to see the situation firsthand in East Palestine back home. The trip offers Trump, who is running to become the US president again in 2024, a fresh opportunity to reprise the role he had as president, surveying disaster damage. The East Palestine village, with just under 5,000 residents, is near the Pennsylvania state line and has grown increasingly Republican in the recent years. Trump won nearly 72% of the vote in the 2020 election, and signs of his popularity remain clear. Meanwhile, there's growing frustration from residents and local leaders about the federal government's response to their safety concerns. Trump and other Republicans have been critical of the Biden administration's response to the derailment, the disaster leading to evacuations with fears of air and water contamination continuing. The White House defended its response and criticized Trump for loosening rail safety measures and environmental protections during his own time as president. There is still no evidence on whether still having those restrictions in place would have prevented this particular accident, but the accident has highlighted Trump's own record of rolling back environmental protections. Trump's administration had rolled back more than 100 environmental rules in total and watered down several regulations at the behest of the rail industry. He withdrew an Obama-era plan to require faster brakes on trains carrying highly flammable materials. He shelved a rule that demanded at least 2 crew members on freight trains. And Trump also dropped a ban on transporting liquefied natural gas, or LNG, by rail, despite fears of explosions. Now, keeping it with the US, which is struck by conflicting weather patterns, while people in the southern and eastern parts of the US are getting roasted under record-high temperatures, the northern and western states of the US are facing a fierce winter storm, causing widespread travel disruptions. More than 1,500 flights were cancelled. Travelers were left stranded at airports. A strong winter storm knocked out power in California. It closed interstate highways from Arizona to Wyoming, with flights badly hit and drivers trapped in cars. And to make matters worse, the next few days are likely to remain the same. But 75 million people in 28 states of the United States of America are placed under winter weather alerts. Many schools and businesses have been shut following blizzards in the states of North and South Dakota, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. Predictions are that powerful wind gusts, potentially reaching over 80 kilometers per hour, and a wind chill as low as minus 50 degrees Fahrenheit will be felt in some parts. For the typically sunny and warm Los Angeles, icy weather has been forecast, while for California, there is a rare blizzard warning. And standing at the opposite extreme is capital Washington, D.C., where the temperatures are so high that they are expected to break a nearly 150-year-old record. While some northern and western parts of the country are shivering, eastern and southern U.S. is unusually warm. Some will be 38 degrees Celsius warmer than others at the same time in the US, particularly for the Ohio Valley and Mid-Atlantic, where temperatures are way above average. Things will feel more like June than February. Shifting focus away from the US to South America, where even as the Rio Carnival was in full swing in Brazil, the South American nation was hit by heavy rains that led to floods and landslides. More than 23 inches of rain poured in Sao Paulo in Brazil during a 24-hour period, among the largest such downpours ever in such a short period in the history of Brazil. Nearly 50 people have been killed and dozens have gone missing after floods and mudslides in São Sebastião town in the state of Sao Paulo in Brazil. The mountainous coastal municipality is the worst hit, where at least 35 people have been killed. Houses were submerged in water and people are still using small boats to escape. Rescue teams are working to find those missing. The Brazilian army has stepped in to search for victims as well as for clearing up roads, while the Navy plans to start building a hospital with up to 300 beds to help relief efforts. Brazil's President Lula da Silva landed in the disaster-hit town of São Sebastião and announced immediate reconstruction of houses for the homeless. This is one of Brazil's worst downpours of rain and is another example of the debilitating impact of the climate crisis. The large-scale, unprecedented deforestation in the Amazon during ex-Brazil President Bolsonaro's regime have only made matters worse. And now, Brazil's current president, Lula da Silva, is putting environmental activists in top positions in his own cabinet. Lula aims to end Amazon deforestation by the year 2030, and his biggest move so far has been appointing an environmentalist, Marina Silva, to lead Brazil's climate change ministry. Up next, tensions have escalated between Israel and Palestine again, with both sides exchanging heavy fire. Gaza militants launched rockets at southern Israel and Israel hit back with airstrikes. The Israeli Defense Force, or IDF, released footage showing what it said were airstrikes on several targets in northern and central Gaza. The video showed rockets hitting buildings and subsequent explosions. The targets included a weapons manufacturing site and a military compound belonging to the Hamas militant group that rules Gaza. Smoke could be seen rising in Gaza City early on Thursday. The video showed rockets hitting buildings and subsequent explosions. The targets included a weapons manufacturing site and a military compound belonging to the Hamas militant group that rules Gaza. Smoke could be seen rising in Gaza City early on Thursday. The airstrikes came after the Israeli military said that Palestinian militants fired 6 rockets from the Gaza Strip. Israeli air defenses intercepted 5 of those rockets, which were fired towards the cities of Ashkelon and Sderot. 1 missile landed in an open field. There were no reports of damage or casualties. The rocket attacks, which were not immediately claimed by Palestinian militant groups, appear to be triggered by the Wednesday morning raid in Nablus by Israel. An Israeli army raid in the occupied West Bank triggered a fierce gun battle in which 11 Palestinians were killed. The bloodshed extends one of the deadliest periods between Israelis and Palestinians in the West Bank. Dozens of Palestinians have been killed by Israeli fire since the beginning of the year. Palestinian attacks on Israelis for the year have killed more than 10 people so far. The violence comes in the first weeks of Israel's new far-right government, which has promised to take a tough line against the Palestinians and pledged to ramp up settlement construction on lands Palestinians seek for their future state. And so all we have time for in this edition of Around the World. Thank you so much for watching. Keep it with News 9+.